The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's emergency department hummed overhead like angry wasps, casting everything in that particular shade of sickly yellow that made even the healthiest skin look pallid. I pressed the heel of my palm against my lower back, trying to ease the persistent ache that had been my constant companion for the past 14 hours. The double shift was finally over, but my body felt like it had been put through a meat grinder. I pulled my hair elastic free, letting my auburn waves fall past my shoulders as I gathered my belongings from the staff locker. The familiar weight of exhaustion pressed down on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Around me, the night shift was winding down, monitors still beeping steadily, the distant murmur of voices from the nurses' station, the soft squeak of rubber soles against linoleum. This was my world now, had been for the past 3 years since David left. Antiseptic smells, fluorescent lighting, and the constant undercurrent of other people's emergencies. Another double, Fiona? Sarah Martinez, my closest friend at the hospital, appeared beside my locker, her dark hair escaping from its neat bun. She looked as exhausted as I felt, her scrubs wrinkled and a small coffee stain on her sleeve. "You're going to burn yourself out at this rate." I forced a smile, shoving my stethoscope into my bag. "The twins need new school shoes, and Emma's been asking about ballet lessons." I didn't mention the mounting stack of bills on my kitchen counter, or how I'd been surviving on peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to make the grocery budget stretch another week. Pride was sometimes the only thing I owned that nobody could take from me. Sarah's expression softened with understanding. She was one of the few people who knew the whole story. How David had cleaned out our joint savings account before disappearing into the night, leaving me with 2 5-year-old daughters and a mountain of debt. "The offer for a loan still stands, you know." "I know." I squeezed her shoulder gratefully. "But we're managing." The lie came easily after 3 years of practice. Managing was a generous term for the constant juggling act of bills, childcare, and work schedules that defined my existence. The clock on the wall read 7:23 a.m. Mrs. Patterson would need to leave by 8 to get to her own job, and the twins would be waking up soon, expecting breakfast and their usual chaos of morning routines. I could picture them now. Emma probably already trying to pick out her own clothes with her particular 5-year-old fashion sense, while Lily would still be buried under her covers, grumpy until she had her morning glass of chocolate milk. "Go," Sarah said, reading my thoughts. "Those girls need their mama." The October rain had started during my shift, a steady downpour that turned the city streets into rivers of reflected neon and car headlights. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around my shoulders as I pushed through the hospital's main entrance, immediately feeling the cold droplets soak through the worn fabric. My car was parked 3 blocks away in the cheapest lot I could find, and I'd forgotten to grab an umbrella from the staff room. The sidewalks were mostly empty at this hour, just a few early commuters hurrying to catch buses or disappearing into coffee shops. Steam rose from manholes, creating ghostly wisps in the morning air. The city smelled of rain and exhaust fumes, with an underlying metallic tang that seemed to permeate everything in this part of downtown. I quickened my pace, dodging puddles and trying to avoid the worst of the downpour. That's when I saw the black sedan. It was parked outside Torino's, the expensive Italian restaurant that occupied the corner building across from the hospital. I'd walked past it hundreds of times, but never been inside. The kind of place where a single meal cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. But something about the car made me pause. It was too pristine, too deliberately placed, like it was waiting for something, or someone. I was so focused on watching the sedan that I didn't see the man emerging from the restaurant's side entrance until it was too late. The collision was inevitable. One moment I was hurrying across the intersection, my head down against the rain, and the next I was slamming into what felt like a brick wall. The impact sent me stumbling backward, my bag flying from my shoulder and spilling its contents across the wet pavement. My water bottle rolled into the gutter, and several pens scattered like dropped pickup sticks. "Shit," I muttered, dropping to my knees without thinking, trying to salvage what I could before everything got completely soaked. My scrubs were already drenched, clinging uncomfortably to my skin, and I could feel rain running down my neck. I'm so sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going. Strong hands appeared in my peripheral vision, gathering my scattered belongings with efficient movements. I looked up, ready to offer another apology, and felt the words die in my throat. The man crouched beside me was devastatingly handsome in a way that seemed almost dangerous. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting, all sharp angles and classical proportions. His suit was obviously expensive, tailored to perfection despite being caught in the rain. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Steel gray, intense, and currently focused on me, with a concentration that made my pulse skip. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low, with just a trace of an accent that suggested old country roots. Italian, maybe. He held out my stethoscope, and I noticed his hands, strong, well-manicured, with a thick silver ring on his right hand that caught the light. "No, I'm fine." I accepted the stethoscope, our fingers brushing briefly. His skin was warm despite the cold rain. Really, I should have been paying attention. I just got off a long shift and... "You're a nurse." It wasn't a question. His gaze took in my scrubs, the ID badge still clipped to my chest. "St. Mary's." Something in his tone made me suddenly self-conscious. I stood quickly, shouldering my bag and taking a small step back. There was something about him that set off warning bells in the back of my mind. Not danger exactly, but power. The kind of man who was accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Yes, well, thank you for your help." I tucked a strand of wet hair behind my ear. "I should get going. My daughters will be wondering where I am." His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Daughters." Again, not a question. I found myself nodding despite the voice in my head telling me to walk away. "Twins. They're 5. And their father?" The personal question should have annoyed me, but there was something in his tone. Not casual curiosity, but something more focused. "Not in the picture," I said carefully. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling that he was memorizing everything about me. The rain continued to fall around us, but he seemed completely indifferent to it, as if weather was something that happened to other people. "Flynn Marchetti," he said finally, extending his hand. I hesitated for just a moment before taking it. His grip was firm, confident. "Fiona Hart." "Fiona..." The way he said my name sent an unexpected shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain. Beautiful name. Before I could respond, one of the men from the black sedan approached. He was built like a linebacker, with the kind of watchful alertness that screamed security. "Mr. Marchetti, we should go. You have the meeting at 9. Flynn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he didn't release my hand immediately. "Of course." His thumb brushed across my knuckles, a gesture so brief I might have imagined it. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Fiona Hart. I hope our paths cross again soon." Something in his tone suggested it wasn't entirely a matter of hope. I watched him walk to the sedan, his movement fluid and confident despite the rain. The driver held the door open with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. As the car pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of Flynn through the tinted window, and for a moment, I could have sworn he was still watching me. The encounter left me feeling strangely unsettled as I continued toward my car. There had been something about Flynn Marchetti that didn't quite fit with the early morning business meeting scenario. The expensive suit, the multiple security details, the way he'd asked about my daughters with such focused intensity. And why had someone like him been leaving a restaurant at 7:30 in the morning? I was still puzzling over the encounter when I reached my car, a 10-year-old Honda with a dent in the passenger door and a rattle in the engine that I couldn't afford to fix. As I fumbled for my keys, I noticed another black sedan parked across the street. Different from the first one, but similar enough to make me pause. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see inside, but something about it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Probably just paranoia, I told myself. The stress of the double shift, the lack of sleep, the constant worry about money. It was all making me jumpy. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, turning the key and saying a small prayer when the engine actually started. But as I pulled out of the parking space, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. In my rearview mirror, I saw the second sedan pull into traffic behind me, maintaining a careful distance. By the time I reached my apartment building, the sedan was gone, and I convinced myself I'd been imagining things. Still, as I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to our small 2-bedroom apartment, Flynn Marchetti's steel-gray eyes haunted my thoughts. "Mommy," Emma's voice greeted me as soon as I opened the door. She came running from the kitchen, her dark curls bouncing, still in her pajamas with tiny rainbows. "Mrs. Patterson made pancakes." "Did she now?" I swept Emma into a hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "And where's your sister?" "Still sleeping," Emma announced. "She said she's too tired for pancakes, but I think she's just being dramatic." Mrs. Patterson emerged from the kitchen, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. She'd been a godsend when David left, agreeing to watch the twins during my shifts for a fraction of what professional childcare would cost. "Long night?" she asked, taking in my bedraggled appearance. "Double shift," I confirmed, setting Emma down. "But it's over now. Thank you so much for staying, Mrs. Patterson. I know it was longer than usual." "Nonsense. These girls are angels." She gathered her purse and coat. "Emma helped me make breakfast, and Lily's just being 5. She'll perk up once she smells the pancakes." After Mrs. Patterson left, I stood in my small kitchen, looking at the stack of bills on the counter that seemed to grow larger every day. The electric company's final notice was on top, followed by the overdue rent notice and a collection letter from Emma's pediatrician. The pancakes Mrs. Patterson had made filled the apartment with the warm scent of vanilla and cinnamon, but even that comfort couldn't completely chase away the cold knot of anxiety in my stomach. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the sound of my phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number made my pulse quicken irrationally. "Thank you for brightening an otherwise ordinary morning, Fiona. F." I stared at the message, my heart hammering against my ribs. How had Flynn Marchetti gotten my number? And more importantly, why was he texting me? I hadn't given it to him, hadn't even mentioned my last name until he'd introduced himself. My hands were shaking as I typed back, "How did you get this number?" The response came immediately. "I have resources. Don't be alarmed. I'd simply like to see you again." I set the phone down with trembling fingers, but it buzzed again almost instantly. "I believe in taking care of what interests me, Fiona. We should have dinner. Tonight." This time there was no question mark, no polite request, just an assumption that I would agree, wrapped in the language of an invitation. And somehow, despite every rational instinct screaming at me to delete the messages and block the number, I found myself staring at the phone, unable to look away. From the bedroom, I heard Lily's sleepy voice calling for me, and the sound snapped me back to reality. Whatever game Flynn Marchetti was playing, I had more important things to worry about. I had 2 little girls who depended on me, bills to pay, and a life to hold together. But as I went to wake Lily and start our morning routine, I couldn't shake the feeling that my encounter with Flynn had set something in motion that I wouldn't be able to stop. The last thing I saw before turning off my phone was another message. "I'll send a car at 7. Wear something beautiful." I stared at my phone for the rest of the morning, Flynn's messages burning like brands on the screen. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to ignore them, to pretend the collision had never happened. But something about his absolute certainty that I would comply made my stomach clench with equal parts fear and an emotion I didn't want to examine too closely. "Mommy, you're burning the eggs," Emma observed from her perch at our small kitchen table, swinging her legs and watching me with the uncomfortable perceptiveness that 5-year-olds seem to possess. I jerked my attention back to the stove, quickly flipping the eggs before they turned completely black. "Sorry, sweetheart. Mommy's just tired." Lily had finally emerged from the bedroom, her dark hair sticking up at impossible angles. She climbed into her chair with the dramatic flair she'd inherited from some unknown ancestor, certainly not from me or David, and announced, "I dreamed about a scary man with gray eyes." My hand froze halfway to the coffee pot. "What kind of scary man?" "Not bad scary," Lily clarified, accepting the plate of slightly burned eggs I set before her. "Like when we watch those movies where the prince looks mean, but he's actually nice. He had a big house and lots of cars." Emma giggled. "That's silly, Lily. Dreams aren't real." But I found myself studying my daughter's face, looking for any sign that this wasn't just a coincidence. Lily had always been the more intuitive of the twins, sometimes saying things that were unsettlingly accurate. David used to joke that she was psychic, back when he still made jokes about anything. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "I hope you slept well. The reservation is at Rossini's, 8 o'clock. The car will arrive at 7:30. F. Rossini's. I'd heard of it. The kind of restaurant that required reservations months in advance and where a single appetizer cost more than I typically spent on groceries in a week. The kind of place that existed in a different universe from mine. I typed back quickly. "I can't. I have children and no babysitter." The response was immediate. "Already arranged. Mrs. Patterson has agreed to stay late. She's been compensated generously for the inconvenience." Ice flooded my veins. He'd contacted Mrs. Patterson? How had he even known her name, let alone found her contact information? The implications of what that meant. The level of research, the invasion of privacy, the casual assumption that he could arrange my life without my permission, made me feel sick. My hands shaking, I called Mrs. Patterson immediately. "Oh, hello, dear," she answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "I was just about to call you. The most interesting thing happened this morning. A gentleman called asking if I could watch the girls tonight. Said he was a friend of yours, and that you had a work emergency. He offered to pay me 3 times my usual rate." "Mrs. Patterson," I said carefully, "what exactly did this man say?" "Just that you needed someone reliable to watch Emma and Lily, and that he knew how much you valued my care for them. He was very polite, very respectful. Said he understood how hard it is for single mothers to find good help." She paused. "He also mentioned that he knew you'd been working double shifts and that you deserved a night out." The casual intimacy of the details made my blood run cold. Flynn Marchetti had clearly done his homework, and thoroughly. "Did he give you his name?" "Mr. Francesco, I think. He said he worked with you at the hospital." Francesco. Close enough to Flynn to be plausible, but not his real name. I felt like a mouse that had just realized it was in a trap, and the cat was still playing with me. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to ask you not to accept any more calls about the girls unless they come directly from me, okay?" "Of course, dear. Is everything all right? You sound upset." I forced my voice to remain calm. "Everything's fine. I just want to make sure the girls are safe." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills that never seemed to get smaller. Emma and Lily were arguing over who got the last piece of toast, their voices a familiar soundtrack to my morning routine. Normal. Safe. The life I'd built for us brick by brick. My phone rang, an unknown number but local area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Good morning, Fiona." Flynn's voice was warm, intimate, as if we'd known each other for years instead of having shared a 5-minute conversation in the rain. "I hope you don't mind my calling directly." "Actually, I do mind," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. And I mind that you contacted my babysitter without my permission. I was simply trying to make things easier for you. There was no apology in his tone, just matter-of-fact explanation. Single mothers face enough obstacles. I wanted to remove one. You don't even know me. I know enough. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. I know you work double shifts to support your daughters. I know you've been alone for 3 years. I know you're struggling financially, and I know you're too proud to ask for help. Each statement hit like a physical blow. The level of detail was impossible unless he'd been watching me, investigating me. How do you know all of that? I told you. I have resources. The question is, what are you going to do with the opportunity I'm offering? What opportunity? You mean dinner? His laugh was low, rich. Dinner is just the beginning, Fiona. I'm offering you a chance to stop struggling, to give your daughters the life they deserve. In exchange for what? Your company, your time, your trust, eventually. The way he said it made it sound almost reasonable, but I could hear the steel beneath the silk. This wasn't a request or even a negotiation. This was a man laying claim to something he'd decided he wanted. And if I say no? The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more businesslike. Then you continue as you are, working yourself to exhaustion, worrying about money, watching your daughters go without things they need. But Fiona... He paused, and when he continued, there was something almost gentle in his tone. I don't think you're going to say no. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone with a mixture of fear and fury. The arrogance of the man was breathtaking. But what was worse was the small, traitorous part of me that whispered he was right. When was the last time I'd had dinner anywhere that didn't have a drive-through window? When was the last time someone had wanted to take care of me instead of the other way around? The rest of the day passed in a haze of normal activities that felt anything but normal. I took the girls to the park, helped Emma with her reading homework, tried to focus on the mundane tasks of single motherhood. But every few minutes, my eyes would drift to my phone, waiting for another message that never came. At 5 o'clock, Mrs. Patterson arrived with an overnight bag and an excited smile. I thought I'd come early, give you time to get ready properly. It's been ages since you've had a nice evening out. I wanted to explain that this wasn't a nice evening out, that I was being manipulated by a man whose intentions I couldn't fathom. But how could I explain something I didn't understand myself? At 7:15, as I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, wearing the only decent dress I owned, a simple black number I'd bought for David's company Christmas party 4 years ago, I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. Not just any car, but the distinctive purr of an expensive engine. Emma and Lily pressed their faces to the living room window, their eyes wide. "Mommy, there's a really fancy car outside," Emma called. "It's so shiny." "And there's a man in a suit," Lily added. "He looks like the prince from my dream." My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked to the window. Below on the street sat a sleek black Mercedes, and beside it stood a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. Not Flynn, but clearly one of his people. The man looked up at my window and nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Patterson appeared at my elbow, peering out at the scene below. "My goodness, that's quite impressive. You're Mr. Francesco certainly doesn't do things halfway." The doorbell rang, and I felt like I was walking to my own execution as I went to answer it. The man from the car stood in my hallway, looking completely out of place among the scuffed walls and cheap carpet. "Ms. Hart," he said, his voice respectful but formal. "I'm Vincent, Mr. Marchetti's driver. He's waiting for you at the restaurant." So Flynn wasn't even coming to collect me personally. just sending his employee like I was a package to be delivered. The casual power play made my temper flare. "Tell Mr. Marchetti that I've changed my mind," I said, starting to close the door. Vincent's hand shot out, stopping the door with gentle but immovable pressure. "Ma'am, with respect, Mr. Marchetti is a man who values punctuality. He's made considerable arrangements for this evening." There was no threat in his words, but the implication was clear. Flynn Marchetti was not a man who accepted disappointment gracefully. "Mommy, are you going on a date?" Emma appeared beside me, looking up at Vincent with curious eyes. "Something like that, sweetheart," I managed, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. Vincent's expression softened as he looked at the twins. "Beautiful girls," he said to me. "Mr. Marchetti mentioned how important they are to you." The comment sent another chill down my spine. Everything Flynn did seemed designed to remind me that he knew about my daughters, that they were part of whatever equation he was calculating. 20 minutes later, I sat in the back of the Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. Vincent drove with professional skill, taking a route through neighborhoods I recognized but had never seen from inside a car that probably cost more than I made in 3 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Flynn. "You look beautiful tonight. Thank you for trusting me." I hadn't realized he could see me until I spotted the second car following at a discreet distance. 2 security details for 1 dinner. Either Flynn Marchetti was paranoid, or he was the kind of man who had reason to be careful. As we pulled up to Rossini's, I saw him waiting under the restaurant's elegant awning, and despite everything, my breath caught. In the soft lighting, he looked like something out of a movie, dangerous and beautiful and completely sure of his place in the world. When Vincent opened my door and Flynn stepped forward to offer his hand, I realized that whatever game we were playing, I was already in too deep to find my way back to shore. "Fiona," he said, my name a caress on his lips. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered." And as his fingers closed around mine, warm and possessive, I understood that this dinner was never really about the food. Rossini's interior was everything I'd imagined, and nothing I was prepared for. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in pristine white linen, while the soft murmur of conversation mixed with the gentle clink of expensive silverware. The maitre d' greeted Flynn by name, his deference so pronounced it bordered on reverence. We were led through the main dining room to a private alcove that overlooked the city, separated from other diners by heavy velvet curtains that could be drawn for complete privacy. "Wine?" Flynn asked as we settled into chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He moved with the fluid confidence of a man completely at home in spaces like this, while I felt like an imposter in my 4-year-old dress. "I don't drink," I said, my voice smaller than I'd intended. "Not anymore." Something flickered in his steel-gray eyes. "Since the twins." The casual reference to my daughter sent a familiar spike of protective anxiety through my chest. "How much do you know about my life, Flynn?" "Enough." He signaled the sommelier with barely a glance. "But I'd prefer to hear it from you." A server appeared with sparkling water for me and wine for Flynn, movements so smooth they seemed choreographed. I watched him taste the wine, approve it with a slight nod, all while his attention remained fixed on me with unsettling intensity. "You're not what I expected," I said finally, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. "And what did you expect?" "Someone more." I searched for the right word. Obvious, I suppose, more stereotypical. His laugh was genuine, transforming his face from coldly handsome to devastatingly attractive. "You've been watching too many movies, Fiona. Real power doesn't need to announce itself." The appetizers arrived. Delicate arrangements of ingredients I couldn't pronounce, artfully plated like small sculptures. I stared at them, calculating their probable cost against my grocery budget, and felt suddenly nauseous. "Tell me about your daughters," Flynn said, cutting into what looked like perfectly seared scallops. "Emma and Lily." They're beautiful names. They're named after literary characters, I said cautiously. Emma Bovary and Lily Bart. Tragic heroines, he observed, and I was surprised by the literary reference. Interesting choices for a mother. I was young and idealistic when I chose them. I thought maybe giving them strong names would help them avoid tragic endings. And their father? David, wasn't it? My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The casual way he dropped my ex-husband's name into conversation made my blood run cold. You've been investigating me. I have resources, he said again, that same matter-of-fact tone he'd used on the phone. David Hart. Married you when the twins were 2, left when they were 4, cleaned out your joint savings account, and disappeared. Stop. The word came out sharper than I'd intended, drawing a quick glance from a server across the room. You have no right to dig into my personal life. I have every right to know about the people who interest me. His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the silk. And you interest me greatly, Fiona. I set my fork down, my appetite completely gone. Why? We met for 5 minutes in the rain. I'm nobody special. You're wrong about that. Flynn leaned back in his chair, studying me with those penetrating gray eyes. Do you remember the night we really met, Fiona? Or have you blocked it out completely? The question hit me like a physical blow. Memories I'd spent 3 years suppressing suddenly flooding back. St. Mary's Emergency Department. 2 years ago. A man brought in with a gunshot wound to the shoulder, bleeding heavily but conscious, refusing to explain how it happened. I'd been assigned to his care during the overnight shift. You remember, Flynn said softly, watching the recognition dawn on my face. Room 314. You worked the trauma bay that night. I did remember. The mysterious patient who'd been brought in without ID, who'd paid his entire bill in cash and refused police interviews, who'd looked at me with those same gray eyes while I cleaned his wound and asked about my life with genuine interest, who'd made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced since before David left. You told me your real name was Francesco, I whispered, the pieces falling into place. You said you worked in import and export. I do work in import and export, among other things. His smile was slight, almost apologetic. Francesco is my middle name. I wasn't lying, just selective with the truth. The memories were coming faster now. 3 nights he'd stayed in the hospital for observation. 3 nights when I'd found excuses to check on him more often than necessary. The way he'd listened when I talked about the twins, about my dreams of going back to school, about feeling invisible in my own life. How he'd made me laugh for the first time in months. You asked me to dinner when you were discharged, I said, my voice barely audible. I said yes. Torino's, he confirmed. You wore a blue dress. You were nervous but excited. We talked for hours. I remembered that night with painful clarity. How he'd been charming and attentive, asking about my childhood, my dreams, making me feel like the most interesting woman in the world. How I'd gone home floating on air, thinking maybe I'd finally met someone who could see me as more than just a struggling single mother. We saw each other for 2 weeks, Flynn continued, his voice gentle. Every night after your shifts. You told me things you'd never told anyone else. About David. About feeling abandoned. About being afraid you weren't enough for your daughters. Stop, I whispered. But he continued. You were starting to trust me. Starting to let me in. And then you saw the newspaper article. The memory hit like a sledgehammer. The morning I'd been getting ready for work, absently watching the news while the twins ate breakfast. The reporter standing outside a restaurant I recognized, talking about a shooting that had left 2 men dead, and the ongoing investigation into organized crime activities. Flynn's photograph filling the screen, not as a victim, but as a person of interest. Flynn Marchetti, alleged head of the Marchetti crime family. I ran, I said, the words tasting like ash. I packed up the twins that same day and moved across the city. Changed jobs, changed everything. You were scared. His voice held no judgment, just statement of fact. You thought I was dangerous. Aren't you? Flynn was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. Yes, he said finally. But never to you. Never to those little girls. How can you say that? I struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like accusations from a crime drama. You're exactly what I was afraid you were. I'm a businessman, Fiona. My methods aren't always conventional, but my business is protection. I protect people, neighborhoods, investments. Sometimes that requires force. You killed those men. I defended myself and my people. His tone remained steady. The world isn't as black and white as you want it to be. I stared at him, this man who'd been gentle with my daughter's memory, who'd listened to my dreams and fears, who apparently ordered people's deaths as part of his daily routine. I can't do this, Flynn. I can't be part of your world. You already are. He leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on me. The moment you walked back into my life, you became part of it. The moment I decided I wanted you, you became mine to protect. I'm not yours, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Aren't you? His smile was knowing, predatory. You're here, despite every rational instinct telling you to run. You remember how good we were together, how right it felt before fear got in the way. He was right, and I hated him for it. Those 2 weeks had been the happiest I'd felt since before David left. Flynn had made me feel beautiful, interesting, worthy of attention and care. He'd listened when I talked, and remembered every detail, had made me believe that maybe I deserved more than just survival. What do you want from me? I asked finally. Everything. His answer was immediate, uncompromising. Your time, your trust, your future. I want you to stop running and let me take care of you the way you should be taken care of. And in exchange? Security. For you and the twins. No more double shifts. No more choosing between groceries and utilities. No more fear. He reached across the table, his fingers finding mine. I can give you a life, Fiona. A real life, not just existence. At what cost? Your independence, your ability to leave when things get difficult. His thumb traced across my knuckles. The life I'm offering comes with strings, but they're golden chains. I stared down at our joined hands, his skin warm and callous despite the obvious wealth. And if I say no, then I'll wait. His voice was patient, certain. I'm a patient man when it comes to things I want. But Fiona... He lifted my chin with his free hand, forcing me to meet his gaze. I always get what I want eventually. The certainty in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a dangerous thrill down my spine. After 3 years of fighting for everything alone, the idea of someone else taking control was more tempting than I wanted to admit. I need time to think, I said. Of course. He released my hands, signaling for the check. Take all the time you need. But while you're thinking, remember this. I'm not David. I don't abandon what's mine, and I don't break my promises. As Vincent drove me home through the city streets, I pressed my face to the cool window and tried to ignore the fact that Flynn's protection already felt like a cage I might never want to escape. I spent the next 3 days in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of normal life while Flynn's words echoed in my head. Work felt surreal, inserting IVs, monitoring vitals, charting medications while my mind churned with impossible decisions. Sarah noticed my distraction immediately. You look like you haven't slept in days, she said during our lunch break. studying my face with professional concern. And you're practically vibrating with anxiety. What's going on? I stirred my coffee absently, watching the cream swirl into patterns that reminded me of Flynn's eyes. If someone offered you everything you needed, but it came with conditions you weren't sure you could live with, what would you do? That's oddly specific, Sarah observed. Are we talking about a job offer or a man? Both. Neither. I don't know. I rubbed my temples where a headache had been building for hours. Hypothetically, I'd ask myself what I could live with, the conditions or the consequences of saying no. She leaned forward. Fiona, you're scaring me. What's really going on? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The girls look beautiful in their new school uniforms. Emma's ballet teacher says she has natural talent. F. My blood turned to ice. He was watching my daughters. Not just me, but Emma and Lily, noting their activities, their progress. The protective fury that rose in my chest was so fierce it left me breathless. I called the school immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. Riverside Elementary, this is Janet. This is Fiona Hart, Emma and Lily Hart's mother. I need to know who picked them up today. Oh, they're both still here, Ms. Hart. Aftercare doesn't end until 6. But I should mention, we had a lovely gentleman stop by this morning asking about their programs. He said he was thinking of enrolling his nieces and wanted to observe some classes. The room seemed to tilt around me. What did this man look like? Tall, well-dressed, very polite. He made a generous donation to our music program before he left. I hung up and immediately called Mrs. Patterson, my heart hammering against my ribs. Oh yes, dear, she said cheerfully. Mr. Francesco stopped by this morning, brought the most beautiful flowers and asked how the girls were adjusting to their new school. Such a thoughtful man. He mentioned you'd been working so hard and wanted to make sure they had everything they needed. Mrs. Patterson, please listen to me carefully. Under no circumstances are you to let anyone near the twins except me. No exceptions. But dear, he seems so concerned about their welfare. Please, I interrupted, panic making my voice sharp. Promise me. That evening, I sat in my living room after putting the twins to bed, staring at my phone and Flynn's message. The casual reference to Emma's ballet talent was particularly chilling. How had he known she'd started classes just last week? The level of surveillance implied was suffocating. When my doorbell rang at 9 o'clock, I already knew who it would be. Flynn stood in my hallway looking like Sin in an expensive suit, his gray eyes taking in my worn pajamas and bare feet with an expression I couldn't read. Behind him, Vincent waited by the elevator, a discreet but unmistakable presence. May I come in? Flynn asked, his voice gentle despite the circumstances. Do I have a choice? You always have choices, Fiona, but some are better than others. I stepped aside, hating myself for the capitulation. He moved into my small living room, his presence immediately making the space feel cramped and shabby. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from his perfectly tailored clothes to the way he carried himself with unconscious authority. You've been watching my daughters, I said without preamble. I've been ensuring their safety. He settled onto my second-hand couch as if it were a throne. There's a difference. They're 5 years old, Flynn. They don't need protection from anything more dangerous than scraped knees and hurt feelings. His expression grew serious. You'd be surprised what threatens the people I care about. Is that what this is? You care about them? I care about you. His voice was low, intimate. They're part of you. Therefore, they're under my protection whether you've accepted it or not. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the apartment's warmth. You can't just decide that. You can't insert yourself into our lives without permission. Can't I? He leaned back, studying me with those penetrating eyes. I've already arranged for their school fees to be paid through graduation. Emma's ballet classes are covered for the year. Your rent is current, and your car has been serviced. The room spun around me. What are you talking about? I'm talking about taking care of what's mine. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a thick envelope. Your debts have been cleared. All of them. Medical bills, credit cards, student loans, everything. I stared at the envelope like it contained live snakes. I can't accept that. You already have. The transactions are complete. His tone was matter of fact, as if discussing the weather. The only question is whether you're going to fight the inevitable or embrace it. This is manipulation. This is protection. He stood, moving toward me with that fluid grace that reminded me why I'd been attracted to him in the first place. Fiona, you've been drowning for 3 years, barely keeping your head above water, sacrificing everything for those little girls. I'm offering you solid ground. In exchange for what? My freedom? In exchange for accepting what's already true. He stopped just close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. You belong to me. You have since the night you took care of me in that hospital room, since you trusted me enough to share your fears and dreams. I was lonely and vulnerable. That doesn't mean I belong to you. His hand cupped my cheek with surprising gentleness. Doesn't it? You could have blocked my number, ignored my messages, refused to come to dinner, but you're here and you're listening, because part of you wants what I'm offering. He was right, and I hated him for it. The past 3 years had been an exhausting marathon of survival, every day a struggle to keep the twins fed, housed and happy, while maintaining some semblance of dignity. The idea of someone else taking that burden, of being able to breathe without constantly calculating costs and consequences, was intoxicating. What exactly are you offering? I asked, my voice barely audible. A place in my life, my protection, my resources, my attention. His thumb traced across my cheekbone. You'd want for nothing. The twins would have every advantage money can provide. Private schools, tutors, opportunities you could never give them alone. And what would I have to do in return? Be mine. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. Completely. No more independence, no more struggling alone, no more pretending you don't need what I can give you. I won't be your mistress. His laugh was low, rich. Mistress is a temporary position, Fiona. I'm talking about something permanent, something legal. My breath caught. Marriage? Eventually, when you're ready to admit what we both know, that you need me as much as I want you. Before I could respond, a small voice called from the bedroom doorway. Mommy, I heard talking. Emma stood there in her princess pajamas, dark hair tousled from sleep, looking between Flynn and me with curious eyes. I moved instinctively to shield her, but Flynn was already crouching to her level, his expression transforming into something gentle and approachable. Hello, Emma, he said softly. I'm Flynn. I'm a friend of your mother's. Are you the prince from Lily's dream? Emma asked with 5-year-old directness. Flynn's eyes found mine over Emma's head, and his smile was knowing. Something like that. Emma, go back to bed, sweetheart, I said, but she was already moving toward Flynn with the fearless curiosity of childhood. Do you have a castle? She asked. I have a very big house, Flynn replied seriously, with a pool and gardens where little girls could play safely. My heart clenched at the obvious temptation in his words. Emma's eyes lit up with the wonder that only children possessed, and I could see her imagining herself in such a place. Can we see it sometime? Emma asked, glancing at me for permission. That's up to your mother, Flynn said, standing slowly. But I hope so. After I'd tucked Emma back into bed and returned to the living room, Flynn was standing by the window looking out at the city lights. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken possibilities. She's beautiful, he said without turning around. They both are. They deserve better than this. I looked around my small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling I couldn't afford to fix, the stack of bills that would never end. He was right. They did deserve better. If I say yes, I said slowly, what happens to who I am now? You become who you were always meant to be. He turned to face me, his expression serious. Cherished. Protected. Free to be a mother without worrying about survival. And if I say no? Then we continue as we are until you change your mind. His confidence was absolute. But Fiona, your daughters are watching. They're learning what you'll accept for yourself, what you think you deserve. What example do you want to set? The question hit home with devastating accuracy. I thought of Emma and Lily, so young but already aware that we lived differently than their classmates, that Mommy worried about money and worked all the time. What was I teaching them about their own worth by accepting so little for myself? I need guarantees, I said finally. Conditions. Name them. The twins' safety is non-negotiable. Whatever your business involves, they're never to be part of it or affected by it. Agreed. I want them to have normal childhoods. Friends, school activities, birthday parties. Not isolation because of who you are. Of course. And I want honesty between us. No more lies. No more manipulation. Something flickered in his eyes. I'll be as honest as I can be while keeping you safe. It wasn't a complete commitment, but it was more than I'd expected. One more thing. If I ever want to leave, if this doesn't work, you let us go. Flynn was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. If you ever truly want to leave, Fiona, we'll discuss it then. It wasn't the promise I wanted, but something in his tone suggested it was the most I would get. And perhaps, whispered a treacherous voice in my head, I wouldn't want to leave once I saw what he was offering. Okay, I said, the word barely audible. Okay. His smile was triumphant, possessive, and despite everything, it sent warmth spiraling through my chest. Good. Vincent will help you pack tomorrow. We'll move you and the girls this weekend. Move us where? Home, Flynn said simply. Where you belong. As he moved toward the door, he paused to press a gentle kiss to my forehead. You've made the right choice, Fiona. For yourself and for them. After he left, I stood in my empty living room, surrounded by the detritus of my old life, and wondered if I'd just made a deal with the devil or found my salvation. Flynn's estate was everything I'd imagined, and nothing I was prepared for. Set behind imposing iron gates in an exclusive neighborhood I'd only seen in magazines, the house sprawled across manicured grounds like something from a fairy tale. 3 stories of elegant limestone and glass, with wings that extended into gardens so perfect they looked artificial. Holy cow, Emma breathed, as Vincent drove us through the gates, her nose pressed to the car window. It's bigger than our whole building. Lily was uncharacteristically quiet, taking in the magnitude of what lay before us with wide, serious eyes. Even at 5, she seemed to understand that this move represented something more significant than just a change of address. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold as uniformed staff appeared to unload our belongings. What few possessions had survived the purge of our small apartment now looked pathetic against the backdrop of obvious wealth. Flynn appeared at the car door before Vincent could open it, his expression warm but watchful as he took in our reactions. Welcome home, he said, helping me from the car before crouching to the twins' level. Would you like to see your rooms? The house was a maze of elegant corridors and rooms that served purposes I couldn't imagine needing. A library with floor-to-ceiling books, a formal dining room that could seat 20, a sunroom filled with exotic plants that probably cost more than my former rent. But it was the twins' rooms that took my breath away. Flynn had given them adjoining suites on the 2nd floor, each decorated in colors that somehow perfectly matched their personalities. Emma's in soft pinks and golds, Lily's in blues and silver. The beds were princess-worthy four-posters, and each room had its own bathroom, sitting area, and enough toys to stock a small store. "There's a playroom downstairs," Flynn said, watching Emma run her hands over a dollhouse that was an exact replica of the estate itself. "And the pool is heated year-round. Maria, my housekeeper, has 2 granddaughters about your age. They visit on weekends." "What about the horses?" Emma asked, apparently having spotted the stables through her window. "Those are for when you're older and have learned to ride properly," Flynn replied. "But there are riding instructors who can teach you, if your mother agrees." Both girls turned to me with pleading expressions, and I found myself nodding despite the surreal nature of the situation. My daughters, who had shared a tiny bedroom in a cramped apartment, now had more space and luxury than most adults could dream of. "Where will Mommy sleep?" Lily asked, her practical nature asserting itself. Flynn's eyes found mine across the room. "Your mother has her own suite. Would you like to see it?" The master bedroom was at the end of the hall, separated from the twins by what Flynn explained was a small library and sitting room. "For privacy," he said, though from whom wasn't clear. The room itself was larger than my entire former apartment, with a fireplace, sitting area, and windows that overlooked the gardens. The bathroom was a study in marble and gold fixtures, with a tub large enough to swim in. "It's beautiful," I managed, though beautiful seemed inadequate. Overwhelming was more accurate. "I had it redecorated," Flynn said, moving to stand beside me. "The previous color scheme was too masculine. This seemed more suitable." I stared at him. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the night you ran from me 3 years ago." His honesty was casual, matter of fact. "I always knew you'd come back eventually." That evening, after the twins had been fed dinner in a kitchen larger than most restaurants and tucked into beds that probably cost more than my car, I found myself alone with Flynn in what he called the informal sitting room. Even informal here meant Persian rugs, original artwork, and furniture that looked like museum pieces. "Are you settling in well?" he asked, pouring himself a scotch from a crystal decanter. "It's all very..." I searched for the right word. "Grand." "Too grand?" I looked around the room, taking in details that spoke of wealth accumulated over generations. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life." "You'll adjust." He settled into a chair across from me, his confidence absolute. The twins seemed comfortable. They did. Emma had already declared the house the best place ever, while Lily was fascinated by the library Flynn had shown them. It was unsettling how quickly they'd adapted, how naturally they'd taken to luxury. "About your work," Flynn said, swirling his scotch. "I've spoken to the hospital. You're taking an extended leave of absence." I jerked upright. "You did what?" "Your supervisor was very understanding when I explained you needed time to settle family matters." His tone remained calm despite my obvious agitation. "The twins need stability during this transition. You had no right to make that decision for me." "I had every right. You're under my protection now, which means your welfare is my responsibility." He took a sip of his scotch, watching me over the rim. "When did you last have time to simply be a mother, Fiona? Not a nurse, not a bill payer, not a woman struggling to survive. Just a mother?" The question hit home because I couldn't remember. Since David left, every moment had been about survival, about keeping us afloat. I'd missed school plays because of work, fallen asleep during bedtime stories, rationed hugs because I was too exhausted to give freely. "Besides," Flynn continued, "there are other ways you can be useful here." "Useful how?" "I need someone I trust to help manage my legitimate business interests. Someone intelligent, organized, detail-oriented." His gray eyes met mine. "Someone who understands discretion." "You want me to work for you?" I want you to work with me. There's a difference. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and Flynn nodded permission for me to answer. Fiona? Thank God. I've been worried sick since you didn't show up for your shift. Sarah's voice was tight with anxiety. HR said you'd taken leave, but you didn't mention anything about family problems. I glanced at Flynn, who was listening to every word with obvious interest. Something came up suddenly. I'm sorry I couldn't call sooner. Are you okay? You sound strange. I'm fine. Just adjusting to some changes. What kind of changes? Where are you? Flynn held out his hand for the phone, and after a moment's hesitation, I gave it to him. Sarah, this is Flynn Marchetti, a friend of Fiona's. She's safe and well, but she's dealing with some personal matters that require privacy. I'm sure you understand. I could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath, even from across the room. Everyone in the city knew the Marchetti name, even if they didn't know the details. I'd like to speak to Fiona, Sarah said carefully. Flynn handed the phone back to me, but remained close enough to monitor the conversation. I'm okay, Sarah, I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Really, I just need some time. This is about that man from the coffee shop, isn't it? The one you wouldn't tell me about. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Fiona, if you're in some kind of trouble... I'm not in trouble. I'm just starting a new chapter. After I hung up, Flynn studied my face with those penetrating gray eyes. She's worried about you. She has reason to be. Do you trust her? The question seemed loaded with significance. With my life. Good. Trust is valuable. He finished his scotch and stood. I'll arrange for her to visit this weekend. You'll want familiar faces while you adjust. It wasn't a request, just another decision made for me. But the thought of seeing Sarah, of having someone from my old life to anchor me, was more comforting than I wanted to admit. That night, I lay in the enormous bed in my elegant suite, listening to the silence that came with money and space. No sirens, no neighbor's television, no thin walls carrying other people's arguments. Just quiet, so complete it was almost oppressive. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway and a gentle knock at my door. Emma stood there in her new nightgown, looking small and uncertain. I can't sleep, she whispered. It's too quiet. I lifted the covers and she climbed into bed beside me, her small body warm and familiar against mine. It's different here, I agreed. Do you think we'll stay forever? She asked. I don't know, sweetheart. How would you feel about that? Emma was quiet for a long moment. I like Flynn. He listens when I talk, and he promised to teach me to ride horses. And Lily really likes the library. What about Mommy? Do you think Mommy likes it here? Another pause. You seem scared sometimes, but not sad scared like before. Different scared. Out of the mouths of babes. My 5-year-old daughter had articulated something I couldn't, that the fear I felt here was different from the constant anxiety of poverty. This fear was about loss of control, about dependence, about what happened when golden cages became so comfortable you forgot they were still cages. We'll figure it out together, I told her, pressing a kiss to her hair. But as Emma drifted off to sleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd saved my daughters or doomed us all. 3 weeks into our new life, I was beginning to understand the subtle mechanisms of Flynn's control. Nothing was overtly restrictive. I could go anywhere on the estate, into town with Vincent as driver, even meet with approved friends like Sarah. But every movement was observed, every choice influenced by Flynn's preferences, every decision filtered through his protection. The twins had adapted with the frightening resilience of children. Emma was already taking riding lessons on a gentle mare named Buttercup, while Lily had claimed a corner of Flynn's library as her personal reading nook. They had new friends, Maria's granddaughters as promised, plus children from their expensive new private school. Their happiness was genuine, complete, and terrifying in its dependence on Flynn's continued goodwill. I was in the garden with them on a crisp November afternoon, watching Emma attempt to teach Lily the ballet positions she'd learned in her new classes, when Vincent appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Hart, Mr. Marchetti would like to see you in his office." Flynn's home office was in the East Wing, a masculine space of dark wood and leather that somehow managed to feel both elegant and intimidating. Maps and architectural drawings covered one wall, while another displayed what looked like legitimate business awards and photographs of Flynn with various city officials. "Sit," Flynn said without looking up from the documents he was reviewing. "We need to discuss your ex-husband." My blood turned to ice. "David? What about him?" "He's been asking questions." Flynn's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "About you, about the twins, about your new living situation. How would he even know? Word travels in certain circles. Your sudden disappearance from your old life, your association with me, it creates ripples." Flynn finally looked up, his gray eyes unreadable. "He seems to think he has some claim to your new circumstances." "He has no claim to anything. He abandoned us." "That's not how he sees it. Apparently, he's been telling people you're still legally married, that the twins are his daughters, that I've interfered in his family. The implications hit me like a physical blow." "We're divorced. The papers were finalized 2 years ago." "I know, but David is painting a different picture. He's also accumulated significant debts since leaving you, the kind of debts that make men desperate." A cold realization crept over me. "He wants money. He thinks you'll pay to make him go away." "Exactly." Flynn leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "The question is, how we handle this situation." "We? You're under my protection now, Fiona. Threats to you are threats to me. And I don't tolerate threats." The certainty in his voice made my stomach clench. "What kind of handling are we talking about?" "The permanent kind." "No." The word escaped before I could stop it. "No, Flynn. Whatever David is, whatever he's done, I won't have his blood on my hands. It wouldn't be on your hands. It would be on mine. Because of me. Because of us. No." Flynn stood, moving around the desk to lean against its edge directly in front of me. "Then what do you suggest? Give him money? That will only encourage more demands. Ignore him? He's already contacted a journalist about our story." The room seemed to spin around me. A journalist? Someone from the Tribune, interested in the human angle of organized crime. How an innocent nurse and her children became involved with the Marchetti family. I thought of Emma and Lily, their faces splashed across newspaper pages, their new life dissected for public consumption. The idea made me physically ill. "There has to be another way," I said desperately. "There is." Flynn's hand cupped my cheek, his touch gentle despite the circumstances. "We make it official. Marriage, adoption papers for the twins, legal structures that make David's claims irrelevant." "Marriage?" The word came out as a whisper. "You knew this was where we were heading, Fiona." The only question was timing. He was right, though I'd been pushing the knowledge away. From the moment I'd agreed to move into his house, we'd been on a path towards something permanent. Marriage was simply the next logical step in his acquisition. And if I say no? Then we deal with David my way. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Marriage to Flynn, or David's death on my conscience. Golden chains or blood on my hands. "The twins," I said finally. "They need to be protected from all of this. Whatever happens, they can't know about David or the threats or any of it." "Agreed. As far as they're concerned, we're simply a family making things official." "When?" "Soon. This weekend, if you're willing. I've already made arrangements. Of course he had. Flynn didn't leave things to chance. That evening, I sat in the twins' playroom, watching them build an elaborate castle with blocks that probably cost more than my former monthly salary. They were chattering about their day, about new friends and writing lessons and library books, completely oblivious to the forces reshaping their world. "Mommy looks sad," Lily observed, abandoning her architectural efforts to climb into my lap. "Just thinking, sweetheart." "About Flynn?" Emma asked with 5-year-old directness. "Among other things." "Are you going to marry him?" Lily asked. "Like in the princess stories?" I stared at my daughter, wondering how she'd intuited what I'd barely acknowledged myself. "Would that make you happy?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically. "He takes care of us," Emma said, "and he makes you smile sometimes." "He promised to teach me to read grown-up books," Lily added, "and he said we could get a puppy if we're responsible." Their easy acceptance of Flynn as a permanent fixture in our lives shouldn't have surprised me. Children adapted, especially children who'd known instability. They saw safety and comfort, and a man who paid attention to them, who remembered their preferences and encouraged their interests. "If we did get married," I said carefully, "you know that would make Flynn your daddy, right? Legally, officially." "Like a real daddy?" Emma asked. "As real as it gets." They exchanged one of those twin looks that excluded the rest of the world, communicating in ways I'd never fully understand. "Okay," Lily said simply, "but we still want that puppy." The wedding was held 3 days later in Flynn's study, with only the twins as witnesses and a judge who owed Flynn significant favors. I wore a cream-colored dress that Flynn had somehow procured in exactly my size, while the twins were resplendent in matching outfits that made them look like tiny princesses. The ceremony itself was surreal. Traditional vows spoken in a room lined with law books and business contracts, binding myself to a man whose world I still barely understood. Flynn's hand was warm and steady on mine as he slipped an enormous diamond ring onto my finger, its weight both beautiful and symbolic of the chains I was accepting. "You may kiss the bride," the judge intoned, and Flynn's lips on mine were gentle, possessive, and entirely too brief. "Daddy Flynn," Emma exclaimed as soon as the kiss ended, launching herself at him with 5-year-old enthusiasm. Lily followed more slowly, but her smile was genuine as Flynn lifted both girls into his arms. "My girls," he said, and something in his voice made my chest tight. This man who commanded an empire with ruthless efficiency, who made people disappear when they crossed him, was holding my daughters like they were made of spun glass. That night, Flynn appeared at my bedroom door with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "To celebrate," he said simply. I'd been expecting this moment, dreading and anticipating it in equal measure. Marriage to Flynn couldn't remain platonic indefinitely, and the tension that had been building between us over the past weeks was becoming impossible to ignore. "The twins are asleep," he continued, moving into the room and setting the champagne on the table by the window. "Maria's taken the evening off. We're alone. Flynn, are you going to run again?" His question was quiet, but loaded with significance. "Because if you are, now would be the time." I looked at him standing in my doorway. My husband now, the twins' legal father, the man who held our future in his hands. Running wasn't an option anymore, if it ever really had been. "No," I said softly. "I'm not running." His smile was triumphant and gentle all at once. "Good, because I don't intend to let you go ever again." The champagne was expensive, effervescent, and went straight to my head. Flynn talked about honeymoon destinations, about plans for the twins' education, about the future he'd constructed for us with meticulous care. His hand found mine across the small table, fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both natural and momentous. "Do you regret it?" he asked as the city lights twinkled beyond the window. Which part? Any of it, all of it, saying yes to dinner, agreeing to move here, marrying me. I considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, I'd been a struggling single mother with more bills than income and no prospects beyond survival. Now I was married to one of the most powerful men in the city, living in luxury I'd never imagined, watching my daughters thrive in ways I couldn't have provided alone. Ask me in a year, I said finally. I will. His thumb traced circles on my wrist, and I shivered at the contact. Every year. For the rest of our lives. When he stood and extended his hand, I took it without hesitation. Whatever came next, whatever price this new life ultimately demanded, I was committed now. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. Flynn Marchetti was my husband. Emma and Lily were his daughters, and I was no longer the struggling nurse who'd collided with him in the rain all those weeks ago. I was his wife, his partner, his equal in this strange new world we'd created together. As he led me to the bed we would share, his hands gentle but sure, I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped fighting what he'd known from the beginning. I belonged to him now, completely, irrevocably, forever. And despite everything, I was finally truly home.